Hi everyone, welcome back to Coffee, Books, and Rain, where we do actually have a little bit of rain outside, so thumbs up for that. We have water instead of coffee, had a swap because it's so late in the evening, and we always have books. So today we are diving into a book called The Staircase in the Woods by Chuck Wendig, and this was a very surprising sort of book in my personal thoughts. I didn't know where it was going to go until we got there. But let's see. This book is approximately 400 pages in hardcover. It is expected publication of April 29th of 2025. It is considered horror, fiction, thriller, mystery, and fantasy. So let's dive into the summary and we will go from there. A group of friends investigates the mystery of a strange staircase in the woods in this mesmerizing horror novel from New York Times best-selling author of The Book of Accidents. 5 high school friends are bonded by an oath to protect one another no matter what. Then, on a camping trip in the middle of the forest, they find a mysterious staircase to nowhere. One friend walks up and never comes back down. Then the staircase disappears. 20 years later, the staircase has reappeared. Now the group returns to find the lost boy and what lies beyond the staircase in the woods. This was a very, like I said, interesting book because you can definitely tell by the cover that it's intended to be horror and thriller. It gives me slightly Stephen King-esque sort of vibes. I mean, that's just my, I could definitely, it's not Stephen King quality. I gave this 4 stars, but it feels like something he could, write so I think that's a pretty good compliment. Because it is intriguing. It's kind of a gritty mystery. It's not always pleasant in some really good ways, like the characters themselves. So we have Lore, and she goes by she, they, and she kind of she dates across across the genders. She really but she's aromantic, which means she doesn't really form those romantic bonds, which is I guess why she doesn't bond well with people. She sleeps with people, but she doesn't bond well with people. And you do see that with her friend group of just the inability to bond well, even with the friend group that she's had since high school. Then we have Owen. Owen seems to be he's a part-time worker at I think a bookstore, and he has this very terrible habit of chewing down his fingernails to the quick. And so he's constantly doing that in the story. There is also Hamish, who seems as though maybe he was maybe, I don't want to say the outsider in the group when they were younger, but seems to have kind of grown up into the one that's married, has kids, is a mortgage broker. He seems to have gone in what you would call the American dream sort of way, even though he's not, it doesn't seem super happy with his life. He's pretty content with where he's gotten. I would probably call him the most successful in life. But Lore seems to be possibly the one who's got the money because she's a video game developer. And then we have Nick. We don't get to learn just a ton about Nick right off the bat, except he's the one that pulls this group of individuals back together. He reaches out to his friends. I think you want to say it sends an email to them saying, "Hey guys, I'm dying. I've got cancer. I want us all to get together one more time before the end." And so he pretty much kind of calls them all out, tells them they got to get together. He buys them tickets, picks them up from the airport, and brings them to where he's at. And so that's kind of how this story starts. Now, what we do learn along the way is the reason they're kind of coming back together, or why they haven't come back together in these past 20-ish years, is the last time they were together, they had gone camping in the woods and maybe got a little wild with things, maybe taking some things they probably shouldn't have, drinking some beer, blah, 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 um, when they maybe weren't old enough to drink. And a staircase, like a spiral sort of staircase, appeared in the woods. Well, one of their friends, Maddie, who I don't know if you would call him more or less like the leader, because I don't know if this group really has a leader. But he did seem to be one of the more assertive sort of personalities. He definitely, um, I guess, fought for his friends the hardest and never called on what they call the covenant. Um, the others kind of had called on the covenant for different reasons. One, to help them pass PE so he could graduate or kind of move on to the next grade. Lore did it so for being able to get back and forth to a class she was taking. So there's a lot of different reasons that this covenant was kind of like it. No matter what, they would join together and they would do something to help the other person. So when someone called upon their covenant, they would then pretty much without question follow through. Well, when the staircase appears, Maddie calls upon the covenant that he has never used for himself for them to investigate this staircase. Well, everybody at that time was nervous and kind of weirded out, and none of them followed him up the staircase. But once Maddie reached the top, he disappeared, and so did the staircase. So now his friends are freaking out. And this is, of course, way back when they were in high school. So, and again, this is not spoiler, because this is what happens in the very beginning of the book. This is not even like the first, what I would call, like, this is maybe the first third of the book. This is really setting up the scenario for what's to come. And that the what's to come part is the part that I'm going to try to be as vague as possible about, because I don't want any spoilers in that particular area. But this is more or less what I would think of as the staging to help you guys understand that this older friend group now, and of course they're pushing at their 40s at this particular point. I would say late 30s, early 40s, if whatever. If they were in high school 17, 18, and 20 years have passed, then I would say 37, 38, somewhere around in there. And apparently during all this time, they've each had their own level of trauma and guilt related to this experience they had. Like one of their best friends has vanished, and they didn't do anything to try to like help him or stop it or follow him so he wouldn't be alone. Well, Nick apparently has spent this past 20 years in a what sounds like a similar manner as Owen, of just kind of getting by, but also doing tons of online deep dives and research into any mention of like staircases, mystery doorways, to try to see how they can, put right what went wrong. So that's where we come back to the present of them coming together now. And Nick has them going camping. So I'm fairly certain, like, you can kind of imagine what's going to happen at that particular point because of the title of the book also. I loved that this book has some supernatural elements to it. And the fact that we do kind of, I don't want to say we get a redemption arc, because that's not the right way to phrase it. But these four, I guess, if they are still friends, these four individuals get to try their hand once again at the staircase in the woods. And what's beyond that staircase and what they have to face is what feels like a lot of personal trauma to each of them, like different things that they have either faced or that, let's just say there is one particular scenario where a girl comes crawling out from under a bed. How this happens, why this happens, I'm not telling you. I'm going to let you find that out. But she is a suicide victim. She has passed away at her own hand. And she and that's just one scenario that they run across. Another scenario they run across is Hamish runs across a room that seems to mirror or be a replica of a house that he has sold in his like real estate days when he was like doing that sort of thing. And this was a pretty hard house to sell because it had a history that he had to disclose to the clients he was trying to sell it to. So they somehow venture into that sort of scenario, and things really do progress from there. And again, I don't want to dive too much into any spoilers from that point, because I think that particular point when the story shifts and we kind of get this new sort of situation going on is very intriguing. I really liked the way the story kind of shifted at that point. I personally had not read much with regards to Chuck Wendig. It does look as though, according to Goodreads, just kind of going back to his name, that he's written quite a bit. And I do feel confident I've read something by him, but I am drawing a blank on what else I've read. I do like that this one other person who wrote the review, just as I'm kind of scrolling, Jamie, says, okay, so never climb random staircase sitting in the wood. Got it. I mean, I didn't think I'd have to have the requisite amount of bravery to do such a thing anyway. So just kind of throwing that out there because I just thought that phrasing was really clever. But I kind of hate still calling them friends at this particular point. They were friends, but I do think there is a point, like, I had high school friends that if we were to get together at this particular point, it would almost feel like we were strangers as well. It for me, from high school to now, has been a substantial amount of time. And so, but we've all gone on our different journeys through life. And certainly we would still be able to probably joke and laugh about things that happened in high school or what have you. I don't think my friend group would have this level of trauma that they were having to deal with. But there is a significant amount of trying to put some of their animosity towards each other, like, aside for like 5 minutes. And for like, especially for Lore, she just seems to enjoy pushing people's buttons. There's a lot of times while reading this that she would specifically try to poke the bear of her friends just to get a rise out of them, which I didn't really like. I don't like that type of individual, and I think that's why her personality was so abrasive to me. Now, each of them is kind of abrasive in their own way, and you will kind of, I guess, see that if you do pick this up, that each of these adults are flawed. They're broken in some way. They aren't the greatest sort of people, but I guess when you look really hard at some people, maybe they're not always such great people either. But I think it does get a little bit claggy sometimes, because I think we do try to hash out some issues over and over again within the friend group. Like, once a topic gets brought up, it does feel like it kind of keeps getting brought up kind of throughout the book. Like, they just won't let it go. And I don't know if harping on the past or harping on these issues is just kind of that way of continuing to like rib each other or to kind of critique or cut each other down. But I think that was a little bit more of maybe the parts I didn't like so much. But overall, I thought the plotting of the book was pretty intriguing. Not going to tell you anything about like how it ends. Y'all have to figure it out and what happens and all of that. But as for setting it up, I hope I've done a good job with selling it to you a little bit. I think the cover for me kind of sold it to me, and the fact that I knew it was kind of going to be this mystery And I was curious. I grew up playing in the woods in Louisiana, and I was very curious to find out more about this staircase in the woods. I always thought the woods kind of had a slightly magical, supernatural, surreal feel. There was specifically a place at my aunt's house when I was growing up that it felt as though the woods had a definitive line between one part and the next, even though all the land was technically supposed to be the same. It was really like you could look out and you could just see the woods like change. It was kind of creepy because you had all these pines and stuff, and then you kind of reached this certain line, and like it was a completely different type of tree, even though it really had no reason to be a different type of tree. It was just the woods. But I don't know. I'm just saying, like, this is how kind of the woods looked at my aunt's house. Pretty cool place, though. Anyway, I do want to thank you all for tuning in. I hope that if you have not liked and subscribed already, that you will. And with all of that being said, thank you so much for joining me on this journey. I will see you all on the next page. Have a great one. Bye.